Lisa Daly and Lori Goodwin are the recovering preacher's kids. Grab a coffee and a snack and sit back and join the conversation as we discuss counting it all joy through the hardships of life.
Well, welcome back to the Recovering Preacher's Kids podcast. We are in a season of count it all joy. And, life is just a bed of roses, is it not? I mean, it is easy peasy for everyone. There's no struggle in life. And hopefully, it's not going to strike me with the lightning that's fixing to come down with my lies here because life is hard. Life is hard, and we go through things, and it's so easy to believe the lie that if you're a follower of Christ, that your life is simple. You have no struggles, you have no worries. And so this season, we're just kind of going over different things that we struggle with and just being honest about issues that we have. And some things I'm finding joy in them, and some things I'm just going to be honest, I'm struggling to find joy. But today we are, dare I say, excited because I don't think this is a topic that a lot of people get excited to talk about, and it's money and finances. And um, I was telling Lisa that God has just really been doing a work in me. I would say this whole year when it comes to finances and money because I stink at it. I am not. My mom was a full charge bookkeeper. Lisa worked with money and numbers, and I don't technically remember what your title was, but you're really good with all the numbers, and I can barely balance a checkbook. I stink at it, and so I um I got married at 18 years old and I was pregnant and I I was in a situation where my heritage is German and Indian, and I joke and say I'm 1/17th rebellious. And so what happened was I decided I'm living in a moment of my life where everybody's telling me, or so I felt like everybody was saying, you're never going to make it. This is terrible what you're doing. And so I wanted to control the one thing I could, and that was money. And I thought, well, I'll just take over the bills. And so for 33 years, I have handled mine and my husband's finances. And when I say I have handled our finances, I have hid our finances. Um, I have it has come in one door. It's like it comes in the front door and I throw it right out the back door. We've robbed Peter to pay Paul and lived one payday to the next. And earlier this year, the Lord just began to be, deal with me or work with me about the secrecy of
Mm.
our finances and keeping them from Shane. Now, my husband has access to our bank account. Don't get me wrong, but he would say, "Hey, I want this." And I would just be like, "Okay." Knowing we didn't have the money, and something as small as going out to a steak dinner to something as large as purchasing a motorcycle, and anyone that knows my husband knows he loves purchasing motorcycles, and so, I'm talking small purchases to big purchases, and so I came to the end of myself, and, the Lord just allowed me to see that I was placing security, happiness, joy, comfort, all of that in a dollar amount. It was like if I had a certain dollar amount in our savings account, and it's not a huge dollar amount, I will share with you. You're going to laugh because I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, oh, I bet it's like a huge amount, $1,000. In my mind, if I have $1,000 in the bank, then everything's okay. And we never have $1,000 in the bank. As soon as I, save up $1,000, something needs tires. And I don't know if you've priced tires now, but 4 tires cost more than
Mhm.
$1,000. And
Mhm.
so what has happened over the course of the past few months is God has shown me that I have been placing all of that in circumstances. I have been seeking joy, security, comfort in circumstances, especially finances, and not in God, who is the source of everything.
Well, as you were talking, it just maybe this is a good point to stop and talk about what joy is. And I hear sermons all the time, so it's hard to always remember, but I've always equated joy and happiness to be the same thing. If you're happy, you're joyful. It's all the same thing. But as I've heard more sermons and teachings on it, have I learned that they're not the same thing. That
No.
happiness is determined by your circumstances, and joy is something totally different. And I shared with you, I was reading a devotion that this writer defined joy, and I'm just going to share it if you don't mind, so that
Sure.
as we go through our season, and I'll keep bringing it up for us to remember the differences between happiness and joy, that we don't get stuck on our circumstances. But she writes the definition as: joy is the settled assurance that God is in actual control of all the details of my life, the quiet confidence that ultimately everything is going to be all right, and the determined choice to praise God in all things. So
Oof.
I just brought that up because, like you were saying, so you took control of your finances because that's what you control. But part of having joy is having the assurance that God is actually in control of your finances. And I'm not
Exactly.
preaching to you, because I am right there with you. I might be an accountant that can balance everything to a penny. And if it's strictly out of penny, it's going to drive me crazy for work or whoever I'm working with. But sometimes I joke around with the people I do bookkeeping with, because they talk about, oh, you're just really good at this. I'm like, well, if you could go home and see my desk and see my books right now, you probably wouldn't hire me, because my personal finances is a totally different story than the way I'm keeping your books.
It's a
So it's just
dumpster
not you.
fire. Well, and
Yes.
what I have found, I was listening to a podcast and I feel so bad that I cannot give this man the credit. 'Cause it's definitely due. But I had been praying that, I just wish that I understood why it was so hard. I mean, here I am 51 years old and I'm still like, God, why is life so hard? Why is this so hard? Why can I not learn my lesson? Why do I keep making the same mistakes? I'm a follower of Christ, I have given my life to you. And so I just randomly came across this podcast and I didn't even watch the whole podcast or listen to it. It was just really a snippet. And he said, the problem with today's believers is that we believe that Jesus saves us from our flesh, but Jesus saved us from our sin, not from our flesh. And that just stuck with me because in our flesh, we're still going to have heartaches and we're still going to have struggles. And that's the whole point in James where he's saying, count it all joy when you go through these things. But part of my struggle when it comes to finances is a lot of 98% of my issues with finances is not a struggle I'm going through, not a test, it's poor decisions. And I have had to become very vulnerable over the past few months and sit down and um I told Lisa when I was telling her this story, I said I sat my husband down and I showed him the balances to everything and he was shocked. And then I got defensive and he's like, "What did you want me to do? Just sit here and be like, that is wonderful news. Thank you for sharing." You know? But it was because what I had done was not fair to him. I had not been honest with him. So then I had to be honest with my husband. I had to be honest with the Lord and I had to be honest with myself. And I
Huh.
think that when you're talking finances, even your own personal finances, it's it's a raw, vulnerable place we don't want to be because we want it to appear that everything is just perfect and wonderful and we have a never ending flow of cash. And that is not realistic. But we
No.
live like it is. We live like we have just this unending well.
Uh,
Like, I'm just going to go in the backyard and draw up some hundreds, and just rock on with the day. And that's not how that's not realistic. Have I said something?
Yes. Yeah, because it kind of goes with sometimes I'll get to talking about money and I'm trying to have a serious conversation. And John goes, don't stress about it. I make money every day. I make money every day. And I'm like, well, yeah, but
Look,
I, don't worry about it.
my son has this philosophy, it's just money, we can make more. I'll make more money. You know, we'll take care of what's gotta be taken care of. And it's like I believe God has he calls us to steward everything he gives us, from your job to your children to, your home and even to your money. We're to steward it wisely. My problem is I'm stewarding it all right, stewarding it right on out the door. And it,
Sorry, you're
it's
killing me.
like it's just it's recently, well, I don't even wanna say recently. God started dealing with me about money at the beginning of this year, and I don't really even know what happened. It's not like some major event happened in our life, but, I just feel like I've continued to make the same mistakes over and over, and I almost have this sense of the Lord saying, "Okay, I can finally work in your life now. You're finally moldable because you're finally willing to let go of control." And the funny thing is, the very first time I created a budget and sat down with my husband and, like, showed him the budget, I thought I was gonna throw up. I felt like a 5-year-old showing him our finances, and I had to, like, giggle about it, but at the same time, I was like, "This is nuts." And I've realized how much a hold it's had on me.
Mm. And I don't know if that's just something for us as women that I think the roles have been reversed. When I worked at the bank and the generation before us, as their husbands died, these widows would come into the bank and they had no clue. They had no
Mhm,
clue what their finances were. They didn't know how to pay bills. They didn't know how to write checks or they didn't know how to call insurance. And it was just, I was just stunned. And it was almost like, okay, this isn't going to happen to me.
mhm,
I'm going to know. But what it seems like we've done is we've done that because John will tell you he don't even have a clue. He don't know how to log into internet banking. He don't know how to pay the bills. He don't and some of that has to do with shift work. It's hard for him to do it. It's just easier for me. But then some of it is I've just taken that on and just said, okay, I'll just do it and not allowed him to be a part of it. But then at the end of the day, when things get tough, then I get frustrated because I can't make things ends meet. But I want to make him happy. I want to make my kids happy. I want to make grandkids happy. So what do? I just rob Peter to pay Paul to make it all work out, you know, instead of being honest. And it's almost like what you're saying. It just came down to having to be honest. And instead of just talking to everybody and say, well, we just can't do this, you
mhm,
know, we try to keep up with the Joneses.
mhm. Well,
But
and
actually, the Joneses and the Smiths down the road are in the same boat we're in. We just don't see it.
exactly, and I have bought into the lie too that if I don't have X amount of money or I don't have this material item or that material item, then I don't measure up. I'm not enough.
Mm,
I'm not good
mm,
enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. And that's just a lie too, because God says you are loved and, you are mine and you are chosen and you are all these things. But it's so much easier to believe where you lack or what you think you lack. Isn't it the movie Spider-Man where he says with great, Spider-Man, he becomes a spider and then he's like, with great talent comes great I don't even know. I shouldn't even quote it because I'm not getting it right. But it's basically the jest he's making is when you have a great responsibility to be given this, to be a human spider. I cannot believe I'm using a Spider-Man analogy in this podcast. But the point I'm making is it's like we always share you can't unknow what you know. And it's like with that comes a great responsibility. Okay. So you know this information. Well, we want to link it to, we want to take the information that we're given, but we want to link it to all the negative things we believe, is the point I'm trying to make. Instead of taking the revelation and the information we're given and then linking it to what does God say
Uh, okay.
and moving forward with the confidence and the responsibility of this is what God says, and this is how I'm going to steward the money God gives me wisely. Because the easy, which is the straight and narrow road, but the easy wide road is I'm going to take this information, believe everything negative I believe about myself, and I'm going to go buy a boat that I can't afford. Or in my house it'd be a motorcycle. I mean, am I making sense what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say? And I think that especially as a believer, isn't it funny that one small thing like your finances can derail a lot because me controlling, wanting to have that hard control of our finances led to me lying to my husband, keeping secrets from my husband, and so it's like that one little thing bred all these other little things. And then when it was all said and done, it wasn't so little anymore. I mean, we're
Mm.
talking 33 years down the road, okay? We're not talking 18 months. Okay, this is 33 years of deception right here. Let's just break it down and get real. And I think that if for women who are single and I think there should be an accountability partner.
Mm.
For me, it's my husband and so we have set some safeguards in place now for me, not for him to control me, but for me to not make stupid decisions. But I think that if you're single, I think it's wise to have a trusted person as an accountability partner in your finances.
Mm. I never really thought about that because most of the time, if we're quite honest, w- we a lot of our decisions on finances and whatever we spend our money on links to a situation or a time when things are um I don't know, we're struggling with something, let's just say. So let's go buy something and it'll make us happy. So the happiness, I know, so the happiness then is short lived. It's okay, but then you're right back. But then you just made the situation worse. You know,
Mhm.
so I can see that, and
Because it's where we're attaching, we believe that if it's almost like what the dopamine effect. It's like, well, if I go by this, well, then I will be full of joy. I will be full of happiness. And like you said, happiness is our circumstances, but joy comes from the Lord,
the Lord, yes, and
you
it's and
know?
it's and it's having that peace when everything's in chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Even though but it's like you said too, a lot if we're talking about in the financial part of it, 98% of the time, it's our own doing that
Mm-hmm.
we're struggling. It's almost like when you're God, I can see God sitting there waiting on I'm not saying on sidelines, but let's just sitting there on sidelines waiting for you, and you know how sometimes your child's just acting crazy or whatever and wanting to throw in a temper tantrum and doing things on their own, and finally they just give up and they want your help. And they go, been trying, how many times have you said, I've been trying to tell you. I tried to tell you that that was going to happen. I feel like that's the way he is. Sometimes he's just waiting for you to stop and say, okay, I can't do this. And he'll go, okay, I've been trying to tell you your joy doesn't come from
Mm-hmm.
what? So now let's work this out, but you're going to have to feel the pain. And that's my problem. I don't want to feel the pain. I don't
Oh.
want to endure the pain. I don't
Mm,
wanna endure the hardship. I don't wanna endure the figuring it out. Okay, this is the problem, you fix it, and let's continue on and we'll be happy. But,
mm-hmm.
when you're talking about where'd you say in James that was? Counting it all joy when you're going through was it James 4?
I think so. My mind's gone blank.
So, it's maybe working through and even though okay, this is where you are in your finances, and there's not a quick fix. It's going to take a work to do it, is to choose to find the joy
Mm.
that he is sufficient to supply all your needs. You know, I don't know how many times I've quoted that to my own children, especially recently when one of mine was coming out of a very hard, you know, it was almost like they were being hit. It was constant boom, 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 boom. You know, it was just life was just being thrown at them. And you know, as a parent, I wish I could do something, and because you're supposed to be able to fix it, right? And you know,
Mhm.
couldn't. Um, but trying to remind them through this all that God had it, He would provide all their needs, and I think that's where we then get mixed up, is because, okay, you're going to supply all my needs, well, then you need to fix my problem. Well, He's not the one that made that decision. You know, He says He will supply your needs, which are food, shelter, water. What are your other, you know, He didn't say, I will supply a bigger vehicle. And I'm preaching here to myself, not just because I'm bad about it too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We mix up our wants with our needs. And, you
Mhm.
know, and I kept, and I've had to remind myself, you know, too, that, you know, as long as you have a roof over your head and you've got food, you know, your needs are being supplied.
Mhm.
You got a job, you need, and you need to focus on that and know and find the joy there, that yes, He is supplying that need, and it's going to take time to work through all our screw up, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense because I think that the key to it is, for me, is I stopped looking at the money and I started looking at the word. What does
Mm.
God, what do you say about money? So over the past few months, as this has unfolded for me, I saw in Proverbs where it said, that a man that doesn't take care of his home is worse than an unbeliever. I saw where it talked in James about, counting it all joy when trials come your way. And I know it's easy to roll your eyes at finances and just be like, well, that's self-induced, but it's still a trial. It might be
Yeah.
my own self-induction that got me here, but I'm still here. But the thing is that you're not going to find joy in an overdrawn bank account, but you do find joy when you go to the Lord and you're like, okay, God, this is where I am. This is what I have. This is what I've done. There's something about taking the responsibility and accountability for mishandling and misstewarding. How would you say that word? If I am
Do
unstewarding what God has given me, I have misstewarded
do it.
it. And there's something about being raw with that
Mm.
and saying, God, you trusted me with this amount of money, and I don't even want to use the word failed you. We can't let God down because we're not holding him up to begin with. But you trusted me. You entrusted me with this, and I did not handle it properly. And so there's something about taking that accountability that changed me. Now,
Mm.
I am still a work in progress, and I'm not going to lie. I ordered DoorDash last night, but I did have the money for it. I didn't put it on a credit card. But there was something that changed in me for the first time when I finally said, I have 100% done this wrong. And I don't know if I'm even communicating that well for it to come across, because I think it can go beyond just finances. But for me in that moment, it was money.
So, and in this particular topic of counting it joy through financial difficulties, basically what you're saying is you have, in order to have that, to find that joy and to count it joy, all joy, is you just gonna, is really saying I screwed up, which is not something I that is so hard for me, because I feel like if I say I did this, then you're going to look differently at me.
Mm.
You know, you're going to look
Ooh.
differently at me. And I got a technical difficulty. Hold on. Um,
Well, and the thing is, isn't the whole thing about I'm worried you're going to think differently of me? That's where we believe the lie that we're holding up the Lord. We're holding up God, and we think we have so much power that we can mess up God's plan. And at
owie, that hurt.
and at the end of the day, all he wants is our obedience. He wants us, I mean, he's the potter, we're the clay. But I mean, if we keep jumping off the wheel, he's not a
Mm.
pushy God, you know. He's not going to force us. And I think that isn't it funny that he can teach us so much in so many different ways. And for me, it's $1,000. Like, I have learned such a huge lesson in such a small, I mean, $1,000 to me is a lot of money. So I don't want to say a small amount of money, but I'm talking about in the whole scheme of things. You know, he's taught me a lot in just, you know, four numbers.
Hmm.
And it was that you're seeking something that I did not create you to seek.
Mm. That's pretty good. You've really stepped on my toes today. Sorry.
Well, at the end of the day, it comes down to y'all should all pray for my husband, because the revelation that he is married to me runs deep around this house. And I hope that sharing this, my hope at the end of the day, you asked me before we started recording, what do I hope the end result is? And I really truly hope that somebody listening to this podcast today, whether it be finances or it's something else, says today's the day I have the courage to admit I am misstewardingly what God has given me. I don't even know if that's a word, but we're going to make it a word. But God, you entrusted me and I'm not doing it right.
Hmm.
If nothing else, just becoming vulnerable and saying, teach me a new way, but be willing to be molded to learn the new way. Get
Mm.
out of your own head
Boy.
and quit being stubborn, saying, well, that's never done it that way before. And so you refuse to do it. Just be willing to learn a new way.
Get out of your comfort zone. Get out of your waffle square.
Thank you for joining us today. May you choose joy as you walk through the seasons of your life. And don't forget to check us out at therecoveringpreacherskids.com.